Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Wednesday Night in America here on the NDB Media Network. Today is May 31, 2023. Veterans Day was just, Memorial Day was just 2 days ago, so we're getting past the holiday here in America. But what a wonderful evening it is here on Wednesday night. The courage to look. We're going to be getting to that shortly. You know who I am. I'm your host, Roger Noriega. Don't forget to visit ndbmedia.net for the entire calendar of events happening here on NDB Media. Follow us on Twitter as well at twitter.net/NDBmedia. You can find us on Facebook as well as Twitch TV. Thank you for joining us. It is wonderful. We do have one announcement. Skyla Elise from the crossover on Disney Plus will be joining us this Monday, June 5th. 2023 at 6 p.m. on Monday. So thank you. My wonderful co-hosts, the men, the myths, the ones who are Eugene Castillo and Chris Jamison. Thank you for joining me this evening. How are you, gentlemen?
Hey, Roger. Thanks for having us. I'm good. I'm really enjoying your conducting gestures. I think you missed your career.
Well, I thank you, but telling people what to do comes naturally. But musically, I think I'm tone deaf. At least when it comes to
a little sheet on your music stand that just says, "Don't look stupid."
Oh, I think I would be able to do that. But obviously, someone who's much more qualified than I am would be Chris Jamison. Chris, how are you doing this evening, young man?
Oh, yes, Roger. It's great to see you again. As far as the qualifications, I think I'll leave that to the professionals, you and Eugene, and performing.
Whoa, wait a minute. When it comes to professionals, he's the professional. I am here on the network. That's the level of professionalism. Am I overqualified for making a fool out of myself? Yeah, no doubt about that. But all kidding aside, I thank these gentlemen for returning because we are going to be discussing yet again another topic which is foremost in the minds of America, North America, dare I say, Central America, South America, Europe, Asia. Is that Eurasia? Africa? Australia? Oceania? This is not a local. Oh, damn it. This is not a nation issue or nationwide. It is a local, worldwide issue, a topic, something that needs to be discussed. And this is where it begins. And I'm eternally grateful that Eugene and Chris have chosen this humble channel to begin the conversation on their endeavor. Why don't you gentlemen talk about that?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we envisioned the courage to look. If you've been following us, you've been following us, of course, but we envisioned the courage to look as an opportunity for all people to come together. Number one, to in the wake of all of the events after the murder of George Floyd during the pandemic, at a time in which people put aside, as the great Angela Davis recently said, put aside their own concerns for their health and showed up in the streets to say this was wrong. And to uncover the complex web of structural racism in society requires a number of things. It requires for a number of people, groups of people, to seriously look at the historical roots of why we are here today, what we've inherited, and to learn to talk about it, even with differing opinions.
Yeah, our course, The Courage to Look, we're currently accepting applications if you'd like to join. Their deadline is on June 14th, but our course endeavors to bring people together to talk about something which is very complex, but also give people the tools to talk about the issues of race and the history of race in America with a sense of respect and dignity, so that everyone walks away with the greater likelihood to have learned something than to shut down and and have it just in a productive conversation.
So I just want to say this is as you said last time we were here, Roger. This is a hot topic, and it's easy to kind of like dismiss it and say, oh, okay, let's let other people deal with it. Let's let the politicians deal with it. But in reality, an elderly woman who was not a politician and did not have throngs of people following her made one simple, silent act of civil disobedience in a peaceful way, and it caused a wave that eventually led to the enactment of the civil rights movement. A number of things caused that, not just one. And it's going to take particularly white people who hold the power of structure in our societies. All our structures, our institutional structures, our corporate structures, our commercial structures, our structures within our religious affiliations. It's going to take some discussing among those who hold the power, which are primarily white people, to talk about why are we in this situation? Why is there a discontent amongst black and brown and you name the color, whatever is politically the correct color to say today, people, why is there this discontent? And it begins with somebody who devoted his life, Professor Ronald Takaki, professor at University of Berkeley, who wrote this, what I think, seminal book that what is a number of printings now, Different Mirror, A History of Multicultural America. And there's actually a version of this book. It's so important in terms of the history as a historian, what he captures, things that we don't even know about, things that are sort of glossed over in high school and college history classes because we have to get on and pass the exams and move on to their other requirements. And some pieces of information that really fill in the gaps, and then to talk about that. So we'd like to do that today on the show with you. And whoever is joining us, please feel free to comment in whichever media you are using to follow the show. So we're going to be reading from the first chapter of Professor Tataki's A Different Mirror. Now we're going to do this exchange thing so one person doesn't make everybody fall asleep. So I think Chris is going to start first, but these are impactful things. So take mental notes, say something in the comments, and we'll address those if we can, if we know anything about them. You have lots of notes, Roger, over the years. You excelled in history, but there are some things here that may surprise you. So we're just gonna read from A Different Mirror, the first part one, the first chapter, and we're going to discuss this. So, Chris, you want to begin?
Sure. Attending the performance of The Tempest, London theatergoers were familiar with the Wild Irish on stage, for such images had been presented in plays like Sir John Oldcastle and Honest Horror. To many in the audience, Caliban might have resembled the Irish. In the late 16th century, shortly before the beginning of English migrations to America, Queen Elizabeth I encouraged some of her subjects to take up private colonization projects in Ireland. This island to the west posed a military threat, her advisor warned, because either Spain or France might use Catholic Ireland as a base from which to attack England. Among Elizabeth's chosen soldiers were Sir Humphrey Gilbert and his half-brother Sir Walter Raleigh. Both were ardent Protestants who believed the Irish Catholics to be pagan savages, a view shared by many of their countrymen.
That's important. Important. Somebody's blocking my face. That's an important point that he just read. So I'm going to skip a couple pages. Everybody knows Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. The Tempest the London audience knew was not about Ireland, but about the New World. For the reference to the Bermuths, meaning Bermuda, revealed the location of the island where Prospero landed. What was happening on stage was a metaphor for English expansion into America. The play's title, The Tempest, was inspired by a recent incident. Caught in a violent storm in 1609, the Sea Adventure ship had been separated from a fleet of ships bound for Virginia and had run aground in the Bermudas. Shakespeare knew many of the colonizers of Virginia, including Sir Humphrey Gilbert and Lord Delaware. One of his personal friends was geographer Richard Hakluyt, author of widely read books about the New World. England's future was in America, proclaimed Hakluyt, and he urged the English to conquer a country, quote unquote, and to man it, to plant it, and to keep it, and to continue the making of wines and oils able to serve England.
What occurred in New England was a different story, however. Here again, the play was previewed. The theater goers were told that Caliban was a devil, a born devil, and that he belonged to a vile race. On the stage, they saw Caliban with long, shaggy hair and with distinct racial markers, freckled and darkened complexion. His distinctive physical characteristics signified intellectual incapacity. Caliban was a thing of darkness, whose nature nurture could never stick. In other words, he had natural qualities that precluded the possibility of becoming civilized through nurture or education. The racial distance between Caliban and Prospero was inscribed geographically. The native was forced to live on a reservation located in a barren region. Here you stay to lodge, to place in a pig pen or sty, me in this hard rock, he complained, whilst you do keep me from the rest of the island. Prospero justified the segregation, charging that the savage possessed distasteful qualities which good natures could not abide to be with. Therefore wast thou disturbedly confined into this rock, who hadst deserved more than a prison. The theater goers saw Caliban's sty located emblematically, at the back of the stage behind Prospero's study, signifying a hierarchy of white over dark and cerebral over carnal.
I make a couple points, but we're not going to read, but skip over that. Shakespeare often took words and rearranged them. For example, take the word Caliban, which is one of the principal characters in The Tempest. So he takes the word Carib, which was the name of an Indian tribe that came eventually to mean a savage of America, and combined it with the term cannibal, which was derivative. And we know that Shakespeare sometimes rearranged letters and words. For example, Amleth, the name of a prince in the Viking era tale, for example, became the name Hamlet. So this is something that Shakespeare was accustomed to doing. So I'm jumping to page 33. Like Caliban, Indians seem to lack everything the English identified as civilized: Christianity, cities, letters, and clothing. Unlike the English, Indians were allegedly driven by their passions, especially their sexuality. Amerigo Vespucci was struck by how the natives embraced and enjoyed the pleasures of their body. He wrote, They are lasciviousness beyond measure, and the women far more than the men. When they had the opportunity of copulating with Christians, urged by excessive lust, they defiled and prostituted themselves. Could Caliban ever become civilized? The natives seemed to be educable, for Prospero had taught him as a European language, saying, I took pains to make thee speak, taught thee each hour one thing or other. When thou didst not, savage, know thine own meaning, But what's gabble like a thing most brutish? So defiantly, as the slave retorted, "You taught me language, and my profit on't is. I know how to curse. The red plague rid you for learning me your language." And so goes the connection between landing in America and Shakespeare's play that rapidly captured the attention of London audiences.
Just have one more paragraph. Indians came to personify the devil in everything the Puritans feared: the body, sexuality, laziness, sin, and the loss of self-control. They had no place in a New England. This was a Puritan triumph trumpeted by Edward Johnson and his wonder-working Providence, where there had originally been hideous thickets for wolves and bears. He proudly exclaimed in 1654. There were not streets full of girls and boys sporting up and down, with a continued course of people. Initially, the colonizers themselves had lived in wigwams like Indians, but now they had orderly, fair, and well-built houses, together with orchards filled with goodly fruit trees and gardens with variety of flowers. The settlers had also expanded the market, making New England the center of production and trade. The settlers had turned this wilderness into a mart. Merchants from Holland, France, Spain, and Portugal were coming here. Thus, proclaimed Johnson, hath the Lord been pleased to turn one of the most hideous, boundless, and unknown wildernesses in the world in an instant to a well-ordered commonwealth.
So later, Takaki writes, "What occurred in New England was a different story, however. Here again, the play was preview. The theater goers were told that Caliban was a devil, a born devil, and that he belonged to a vile race. On the stage, they saw Caliban with long, shaggy hair and with distinct racial markers, freckled and dark in complexion. His distinctive physical characteristics signified intellectual capacity. Caliban was a thing of darkness, whose nurture could never stick." So, skipping over to you get the idea. So there's the colonization in what Vespucci named America, and then there's simultaneously a play going on that Shakespeare wrote, which was The Tempest. So Indians.
I think we just read that.
Okay, so
I think we're done.
And then I wanted to end this little, potpourri of chapter 1 with this quote by Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson wrote in a letter in the last year of his life, 1824, where he offered his vision of an American empire. And this is Thomas Jefferson's letter. "Let a philosophic observer commence a journey from the savages of the Rocky Mountains eastwardly toward our sea coast. There he would observe the earliest stage of association living under no law but that of nature, subsisting and covering themselves with flesh and skins of wild beasts. He would next find those on our frontiers in the pastoral state, raising domestic animals to supply the defects of hunting. Then succeed our own semi-barbarous citizens, the pioneers of the advance of civilization, and so in progress he would meet the gradual shades of improving man until he would reach his as yet most improved state in our seaport towns. This, in fact, is equivalent to a survey in time of the progress of man from infancy to the present day." So Hitaki says, here was a Jeffersonian version of John Winthrop's City Upon a Hill. The land was not allowed to lie waste without any improvement. The early forefathers had commanded, and now the Republican errand into the wilderness was requiring the citizens of the new nation to subdue the land and advance their frontier westward. Such a view carried dire consequences for the Calibans of Americans called Indians. Like Prospero before him, Jefferson saw the westward advance of the frontier as the movement from savagery to civilization. So those were excerpts from chapters 1 and 2 of Professor Tataki's A Different Mirror.
Once again, that's the image of the book. It's available where? Amazon?
Goodreads.
Goodreads?
Kindle.
Yes.
Audible, there's an audiobook.
Barnes and Noble. It's still around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's cool. I just want to put that out before I forget.
A books. If you kind of there are very subtle points of the various passages that we read that to say it in a very delicate way are alarming. So anyway, you've taken history classes, Roger, and some of these things I suppose might be sounding new to you. Yeah? No?
Yes, some of it is. I've spent time. I am more of current events and political theory, so I spend a lot of time on, when it comes to history, how we got to where we are today. I'm not going to say the criminal aspect of it, but I know what they did. It amazes me, and this is way off topic, gentlemen, that when it comes to the Civil War, people do not understand what the Missouri Compromise is.
Yeah. Well,
and it's
it gets addressed later in the book, but
Yeah.
let's just mimic what we kind of do in The Courage to Look, which is there were several things that we mentioned. That is a depiction of othering a race that still exists with us today. There's also a depiction of the ideal of an American empire that seeks to educate and remove the savagery out of the native peoples. And like it or not, these initial, even from our forefathers, these initial, and how it was depicted on stage in Shakespeare's The Tempest, these initial principles of societal hierarchy are still with us today.
Yeah, and it's interesting also to know, the origins of this, that, it was, this kind of base level projection of the English onto originally the Irish and eventually the indigenous people of the Americas and African Americans and enslaved peoples and people from other regions of the world that were part of the America experiment. And it seems America, for whatever reason, has an idea that there are parts of it which it can't recognize and accept as they are, because the indigenous people who were here, they had their own thriving societies, thousands of years before European settlers, arrived here, and it's a true tragedy that the wisdom and the history and the greatness of those peoples has been lost for nothing more than financial gain.
It is a shame, gentlemen. You mentioned cultures. I do study that a great deal, and it is sad that just because the indigenous people or whoever that the powers that be met, just because they didn't dress as they did and did not speak the way that they did, or didn't have what they believed their understanding, it was they were done away with. It was sad, and it it is horrible. And reading in history, I'm not going to say might makes right, but they certainly wrote the history. And in common history, none of this is taught. Race relations are not discussed at any point. I suppose we're at a not a crossroads, but we are now at the point where we can have this conversation because it's not our fathers, it's not our grandfathers or anyone that actually committed the crimes as it was over the years. These people are further back.
Yes, absolutely. So we are getting further and further away from the principles of history, and it causes a problem if we don't talk about it. Number one, the famous reaction of, well, I wasn't part of that. I didn't create that. I didn't make those decisions, and it's not my fault for being born white. And others types of reactions.
Yes, there's an unwillingness to investigate the history, and we see it with the policies that DeSantis is trying to enact in Florida and other places around the country, where just even mentioning a true authentic history which is factual and based in the true experiences of peoples outside of white Americans is being dismissed. And we don't, I mean, since I don't talk, I don't have the words to describe it, but in general, it's just alarming that something that could possibly be rectified with authentic contrition and an interest to undo what I feel many white people understand, that there may be a reason for that certain groups have with the way America is run, that people default into feeling attacked or belittled when it's just simply people trying to make history right again, trying to establish a true relationship between everyone and the country on an even level.
That's a very high. That's a very high aspiration, and maybe that's like a fruition or a goal or a dream. What the courage to look is simply about is getting people together to talk about history and to look at how we may have a role in perpetuating structures that were inherited by our birth. We ourselves did not create this. We inherited this. You went off topic and went into the Civil War, and Tataki goes into the Civil War, and I don't want to do, but let me just give a personal parallel to what chapters 1 and 2 are about with my ethnic history. In the land that is now known as the Philippine Islands, historians have shown a number of things that were essentially erased. That there was a major trade route via water through the South China Sea, trade and exchange with China and these originally Malay people and other races, and there was a wisdom tradition and a language that had its own alphabet that we will never know anything about, because after the conquistadores arrived to take possession of the and name these islands the Philippine Islands after King Philip. It was all erased. All traces of the language, all traces of the wisdom tradition, and all traces of what we could have learned from an economic viewpoint about that trade route. Just as important as the Silk Road was to history and culture. There was a similar trade route between China and what is now the Philippine Islands. We've lost all that. We'll never be able to recover it.
There are older gentlemen in my life that have said, "I have forgotten more than you will ever know," and it's a thing of arrogance. But in the case of history, it's almost criminal, because it's not that we've grown older and we're forgetting. It's because it was done deliberately. And that is, I believe, the crime, the sadness. But it begins, I don't know if there's ever going to be an atonement.
Are you saying, wait, are you saying deliberate forgetting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Older people forget because of age. History as is now is a deliberate attempt to cover up that which came before. And it's really unfortunate. And I'm not going to belabor or lecture anyone with it, but yeah, there's more nuance. There's more, but you have to have the courage to look. You have to have the courage to read. But history, along with certain aspects of math, are some of the most boring subjects there is. And it's unfortunate. And how do we get around that? By having these conversations.
Well, we have a question that came in actually that goes to that, but I'm kind of inspired. Do you have a way of showing just that graphic, the background graphic without our faces?
Which
the
one?
hand with the tree?
Oh, yes. I apologize. I will now.
Can you show us that graphic? I want to talk about what you just said in relation to that. Yeah. So we have the ability, and we're just going to use this graphic to, if you don't mind, Roger, to piggyback on what you just remarked upon. When we forget our history, even if it isn't our direct history, we will make the same mistakes again and again and again. We hold in our hands the power to reverse the negative forces that are not so much the purposeful ones. I mean, somebody mentioned DeSantis, but the negative forces that are by omission, not by commission. And over time, the dream that we hold in our hands that was first dictated by what I read, that letter by Thomas Jefferson, that dream begins to get morphed and unfed and begins to look quite like that tree. This is what we are holding up in our hands. This is what we are handing to our posterity, to our children and our grandchildren through let me just borrow a religious phrase, through the sin of omission, the omission of forgetting. Thanks, Roger. So we did get a question that actually kind of connects to what you were saying.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read it. The question is, do you notice a generational difference in white people's understanding of institutional racism? A follow-up question, do you have a different stance toward a 85-year-old's racism that you do toward a 35-year-old's racism?
Before you answer that question, Eugene,
I'm not going to answer that question.
Would you gentlemen define the word, and I'm not trying to ambush you, just so that we have a common understanding. Would you define racism? Don't look it up.
Oh, I'm not going to look it up.
How do you define it? And then Chris.
Okay, so I'm just going to define racism as simply as the internal othering of a person or group of people in order to either keep the status quo or in order to maintain one's own temporal goals.
And I guess I would say racism is something that is a product of using a mistruth to define or limit or a particular group based on their biological features, and also prevent them from having an equal say in their lives, in everyone's lives.
Not to contradict or to add, but racism is the actual action of fear becoming anger. For me, that's what always has been racism. Whoever it is that is expressing it, enduring it, whatever, the people who are fearful are the ones that become angry, and by becoming angry, that's the actual act, in my humble opinion.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think as most, I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a psychologist, but I have been working in DEI in one capacity or another since the early 1990s, so I know a thing or two about what has worked and what has not worked, and I think what you're talking about is the visible result of what I said, which is first there is the othering, and then the othering becomes so uncomfortable that what you said becomes sort of the normative product.
Yeah, I definitely feel there's definitely a component of fear at the root of racism. Fear of what? It's definitely an irrational fear, especially given from how much we see in some pockets of the media about the excellence and strength and greatness of people of all races or nationalities. And it's something that that act to turn the fear into anger and to violence in some cases, it's an unfortunate part of who we are.
But we like to go into some of the subtle things before. I mean, it's very obvious what a neighborhood should do if somebody begins to act out, right? Because then you want your neighborhood to be safe, or your small community or society at large. But if we don't look at the more difficult challenge of looking into one's own mirror, that's why Professor Tasaki's book is called A Different Mirror, among the many reasons, in my opinion. A Different Mirror is that he provides a historical mirror that fills in some gaps that I honestly believe most people who are not historians are aware of. I think even my theater friends might be a little bit offended that we would talk about The Tempest. Such a great work, and to talk about the racist aspect of The Tempest. But kind of before the moment that othering occurs, then that is the seed of the fear that leads to other actions.
Knowing that, we all took a shot at that. Go back to that question, and if I may continue that, the question that was asked.
Oh, he didn't answer the question.
No, not one of us. I asked, define racism and then move forward. So,
well, just to refresh people, the question is, do you notice a generational difference in white people's understanding of institutional racism? It's I guess you could say it's like a drink served multiple ways. Like, you can have a cup of coffee, you can have a latte, or you can have a frozen drink, but it tastes different, but it's still the same, still essentially the same drink. So I know for me, sometimes it's more difficult to hear young people speak with a very ingrained sense of racism and unearned privilege, because I guess I was someone who mistakenly felt that as time progressed, some of those old attitudes would age out, and so people would become more tolerant. But as we've seen over the last number of years, it seems like there's a whole new crop of young people who are more than willing to spout out very racist, very vile attitudes, because that's what people are doing on social media or for other reasons. So yeah, it's my answer.
I think I have a different take on the question. I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer the question literally per se, but I spent quite a bit of my career working particularly with middle school students in the early 2000s and in the middle 2000s. And I sensed that I loved the middle school age because they have this great desire to want to be adults, and yet they still, dependent on their families and their parents. And we created, modern music using instruments they made and brought from home. But we brought in topics that we composed music about stories and topics that were relevant to them. And in one of these compositions, this program that I did in Sacramento, which was read in I think the 104th congressional record and won a number of awards. These students depicted slaves being on boats, being forced to come across, and they used music and song and sounds of change to depict that reality. So I think, my experience is primarily with not with 35-year-olds, but with middle school aged young people, as well as sort of the early 20s folks. And I think that generation has had a little bit more openness to talk about race and gender and history in a way that their parents don't or couldn't or didn't have in their education. But it got to sort of a point of it's so obvious, and kind of like the teenage eye rolling thing is like, yeah, Dad, get with it, And yes, there is that component of hopefully a minority of young people who are in harmony with some quite dark forces, let's say, and dark ideals. That I don't have any personal experience about, but it is happening. We do see that. In general, I think young people are very open. And I think music and the arts and whatnot are a great way to help them to expand their minds. And they are our future. They are going to be holding that tree of the dream of American history, American prosperity, American, that image that we use to be quite provocative about discussing these ideas in reading quotations from a different man.
That's a wonderful answer. I like it, both of you. I will not even. I'm no one. If you gentlemen are not qualified, I'm not. So I'm not going to go ahead and even try that. It's not my place.
Let me try to bring this home, Roger. You are qualified because you are connected, and maybe even more so than I am with popular culture. I tend to have my head buried in music of Johann Sebastian Bach. So I'm a little bit divorced or one step away from popular culture. But let me lay out for you a scenario of several friends of mine whom or let's say associates or colleagues or acquaintances, a variety of that type of friendship, who are definitely on board with the idea that the introspecting required of that courage to look requires. This is important. And I hear from them. I listen. I'm trying to listen more and more. I hear from them again and again. I ask them, well, what is your experience like going to grocery stores? And I can think of a couple people, for instance, say, well, I live in a kind of secluded neighborhood, and it's just more convenient to go to the grocery store in my neighborhood. So I don't have these experiences where I don't feel in danger, or I don't feel that there are people in the grocery store who might be homeless, that might, have an emotional breakdown and make me feel. And then I would ask them, have you ever thought about shopping somewhere else just to get a different experience? And the resistance that I have, the resistance to that idea that I keep hearing again and again is odd. And then counter that with these similar types of folks that I engage with would say, well, I watch XYZ TV show, and it's very clear that society has changed. There are interracial marriages in these TV shows. There are heads of emergency departments that are African American. The list goes on. And so, in a way, I think the networks are trying to portray a wishful look at what society actually is like, where the reality is that those who have the power to make changes, structural changes, see these programs and then feel, like you said, like the older gentleman, it's easy to forget that this isn't reality. And so you put on your TV maybe once or twice a month or a week and watch a few shows, and you get a false sense of security that everything is okay out there.
I would appreciate if you gentlemen in a future episode would discuss that false sense of security, because Hollywood has never, ever, ever, and probably will never, ever give us a proper image or a proper understanding of what society is. It's a commentator. That's all it is. And this is not meant to be argumentative in any way, but people unfortunately learn their history from TV, from movies, and it is so sad. I digress, but I didn't see a movie Schindler's List, not because I was an elitist or anything above it, but because I was like, oh wow, history, go learn it. Learn what from a movie? What Schindler did. I can mention 10 other people that did the exact same thing as him. I don't need to go to the theater to learn history or to learn where I came from or what. And the vast majority of people in the world don't read. They see it, and it's often wrong. But that's probably my lecturous tirade. And yes, that is trademarked, a lecturous tirade.
Well,
that is from Roger Noriega.
Hollywood has got to sell tickets. That's the one thing. And into a different topic, for example, Immortal Beloved, so-called mysterious unknown love of Beethoven, or even the story of Mozart in the 1980 something movie Amadeus. It's going to exaggerate things and take things out of the context, and that's always going to happen. But what I'm talking about is, and what you're talking about is, why are we learning history from from movies and from TV, rather than actually picking up a history book, actually picking up, very critical book of history, Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy, and understanding why not only our structural and societal systems are have melded and meshed the way they are, but why our philosophical systems are the way they are. We presume that goodwill and altruism is the motivating factor, and sometimes that's not the case. So, did I just see somebody make a comment?
Yes, a gentleman that I know on the internet. I thank him for stopping by. His moniker's Lethal Migraine, but that is not his real name, obviously.
I hope you don't have a migraine today.
He actually might be your target audience, but we'll leave it at that. But the U.S. is messy, and people are quick to label everyone and everything. And yes, he has stated this many times in the past. I am almost 44 years old, and the 9 weeks I spent in the tribal region of Ghana, I felt more comfortable than I've ever felt in this country. In Ghana, I was just another person. There were some who came up to me and said I was the first white person they'd ever seen. But race wasn't an issue. People are just allowed to live.
That's so beautiful. Bravo. And this is what I was talking about, othering. Unless we can have the courage, and sometimes maybe we have to kick oneself in the butt to take that mirror. I don't have a prop. You have a prop. To take that mirror and look deep into our minds and our hearts, to look at those moments that we other groups and make and do the othering of people and even societies, and yet migraine, who I hope feels better, can have an experience of I don't know, I want to put words in his mouth, of unity or feeling camaraderie or at oneness, when othering isn't the thing that is the motivating factor in our structural systems.
I have known Lethal Migraine for quite a bit of time, and I'm not going to speak for him. Let me tell you, he tells it straight. He is, I think, a good person. Very infuriating to many others because of his straight upness. I may have just made that word up, but he is an observer of the human condition. And he has an honesty to him. And I appreciate the comment. I'm not going to blow his ego because I have to deal with him several times throughout the week. But he knows. He knows the. Oh, I was about to say respect. I'm not prepared to say that. But I've known this gentleman for a long time. We've never met personally. And let me tell you this. When he mentioned that he was also AB positive blood type, I was like, oh, is that why we seem to have an understanding? But that's it. It was just a personal comment. But I do thank him for joining us. And his comments are straight up. He is blunt and honest, and it does annoy people on that level of honesty.
No. He's right on.
I appreciate it.
He's right on target, and he actually, maybe this is a good way to kind of bring things. We read some really harsh bits of history, not so nice things to be proud about our collective history, but we didn't do it. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to change. So he mentioned Ghana, and I'm gonna share what apparently is a true story, and I cannot give the source because many writers, spiritual writers and philosophers, and the Joseph Campbell types have referred to this story before, and I'll just improvise because I didn't plan on talking about this, but somewhere back in time. In somewhere in Africa, there was there was a tribe within which, if someone performed something quite heinous, killing somebody in the tribe, or betraying somebody in the tribe, or something quite unspeakable, rather than punishment, rather than any of the things that all of our minds go to immediately, and maybe somebody could tell the story better than me. This particular tribe does a ceremony where they bring this person who had committed this heinous act, and they surround him, babies, children, surround him or her, and one by one, this is like a ceremony. One by one, they recite all of the good qualities of that person until every member of the village has finished doing that. And it could take several days. They do it all through the night until pure exhaustion. It is just like this frenzy of reminding the entire village and that person of their positive attributes. And this is the way that this particular tribe chose to deal with crime. And this is how this particular tribe was able to have a new understanding of the word forgiveness.
Eugene, there's an additional comment. In this country, there's always a target on the backs of someone. Most of U.S. history involves screwing over some group. The way most of the world sees us and what actual reality is are two completely different things.
Yeah, I think, the readings that we were doing this evening, discussing how certain people in power in England view the Irish and eventually the indigenous people of America, lines up, I think, somewhat with what the statement that was just, Migraine's statement, that there are two sides to America. There's a part we show sometimes in Hollywood or in our music, and like the values we like to think we are, and then there's a part that are kind of part of this book, and which are unfortunate and tragic. And I think the more we can, like we all did here today, and come together to talk about these issues and spread light on them, and also give people an opportunity to form a more authentic opinion of America, and feel regret for what collectively we have done, but also feel a sense of opportunity to make that country, to make a country that can with authenticity be a great country.
And so let me give a preview. The cool thing about migraine, yeah, I really hope you don't have a migraine. The cool thing about where I work now, about 90% of my coworkers came from Africa or Asia. Being able to learn from them in their country is quite enjoyable. Bravo! I mean, enjoyable. I experienced that during my conducting career, traveling the world. Not only enjoyable, but it made me a better person.
I'm not sure exactly where the lethal migraine is, but he's a migraine to others. So that's his moniker.
Oh, I don't know about migraine to others.
Oh, you don't know.
Okay,
But,
all right. No.
Yeah.
He's really contributed. He or she has really contributed to
Yes.
our conversation today. But let me give a little commercial and a heads up on what we want to do the next time. So this is just part of what the Courage to Look does. Next time, and I think it's in a couple of weeks on a Wednesday.
I believe it's 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks' time, we're going to do a different type of activity. We're going to do an activity that we do in our Courage to Look group. We're going to watch something from network television, and then we're going to react to it with some technology that will teach people how to use. You can, if you're driving or whatever, you basically text a word or whatever to that number, and we get to see everybody's reactions. Why? because we do not know how to listen to each other and how to listen to opposing reactions. And even if we listen to an opposing reaction and it's not ours, we still feel discomfort until we don't. So we have that little. So we have that little activity coming up in 2 weeks, and I wanted to pitch that. But maybe Roger, if you can put up the just the hand in the tree again for a couple closing comments, and maybe that was magical. You got that down. So invite if you're watching this later or now, or if you're not watching and are driving, there's an image of a hand holding a tree that is on its deathbed, a tree that is dying. So this has multiple symbolisms. We are this is us handing to our children and our grandchildren what we have done with North American society. This is also us holding what we feel inside about what we've done or not done in our roles to dismantle structural racism. And this is also us looking into a different mirror within our own souls and seeing that we're all human, and growth is going to take time. But this growth is worth holding up, even however painful or ugly the tree looks. This is the growth that we hold up as a sign of hope to every human being in this world.
I thank you for that, gentlemen. All right. Lethal Migraine, I appreciate the comments, and everyone else watching both live and later on in what we call the archive. Thank you. Please comment on this episode later on, and contact Eugene Castillo and Chris Jamison. They are on their Facebook group, which is
the Courage to Love discussion group.
And there it is.
Write to us at courage2look@gmail.com with the number 2. And we have some other variations on a theme, so to speak, using a musical term, for people to experience just the essence of what this type of reflection and discussion and sharing of history and just learning to talk to one another is like, without having to be fully vested in the full course.
All right, we'll do that. We'll be on in 2 weeks. And excellent. Check out the schedule at ndbmedia.net. We will advertise this one a little bit more than when we did this time. No professional excuses. I have way too many to give. But links will be up very soon for the next episodes, probably within the next day or so. So we ask you to bear with us and join us. Again, gentlemen, any last thoughts before we have to go?
No, I just want to thank you again, Roger, for having the two of us, have these discussions and bring up the material. You've been a great host. You facilitated a great discussion. And so I just want to say thank you.
I'll just echo that. I could say something else, but I just echo that because for somebody like you, who has so many interests, and we go back a long way, to have such a big heart, to care about what we're trying to do and give us this platform. This is a man who really wants to see that tree blossom and grow for his children and grandchildren and great grandchildren.
That might be the activist in me, but that might be a bad word to some people. So, gentlemen, I'm not going to accept credit just because I don't know how to accept credit. So, let's just say that it's an endeavor. It is something that we all can do, and we're doing it. And I think that's the best thing is we're taking that step forward to have that conversation. And I am thrilled to be able to be a part of it. And I look forward to seeing this continue. And who knows what will come of this. Somewhere it says if you change the mind of one, you've changed the mind of the world. And it might be from that very same movie that I kind of, don't get me wrong, Schindler's List is an important movie. It needs to be watched. But hopefully you didn't miss the point of that story. But anyway, we're good. Chris, thank you. Eugene, thank you. And I should have said that's Chris Jamison, Eugene Castillo. I'm Rogelio
Noriega.
Yes, and we're good. So we'll see you guys on the other side, and we'll see you on Wednesday night in 2 weeks. We have a lot of stuff going on the network. Please join us. Like, subscribe, follow. We're on our way to 1 million followers. Just don't count the followers now. We'll see you guys on the other side. Peace.